Scott Hall died in 2022, and the truth about his death is far more tragic than most fans realize. Behind the legend of the bad guy was a man who spent decades battling addiction, trauma, and the emotional weight of a life-changing event that haunted him from the start. So today, let's take a dive into his life and see what exactly was going on. Hall's journey in professional wrestling began back in 1984, under the guidance of the legendary trainer Hiro Matsuda. From the very start, Hall stood out. At 6 feet 7 inches tall and weighing 287 pounds, he was a towering presence, impossible to ignore. But it wasn't just his size. Hall had natural athleticism that made him move with surprising agility for a man his size. Even in the twilight years of the territorial wrestling era, it was clear he was destined for the spotlight. Despite his early promise, it wasn't until May 1992 when Hall signed with the World Wrestling Federation. It was here that he reinvented himself as Razor Ramon, a character that fans would instantly recognize. Often described as a glorified Scarface, Razor Ramon exuded a Cuban gangster vibe, combining slick confidence, effortless cool, and undeniable swagger. He wasn't just a wrestler, he was the bad guy. Cocky, charismatic, and seemingly untouchable, Hall's new persona resonated immediately with audiences. He rode that momentum to the top of the card, capturing the WWF Intercontinental Championship 4 times and solidifying himself as one of the most compelling characters of the era. In May 1996, he left the WWF and joined rival promotion World Championship Wrestling. Almost immediately, he became the spark for one of wrestling's most groundbreaking storylines, the creation of the New World Order. In July 1996, Hall, along with former WWF colleague Kevin Nash and the unexpectedly villainous Hollywood Hulk Hogan, debuted as this rogue faction. The NWO blurred the line between reality and wrestling fiction, portraying themselves as an unsanctioned group trying to take over WCW. Fans ate it up. The storyline became the driving force behind WCW's rise during the Monday Night War and helped shift North American wrestling into a more mature, edgy product. Hall didn't just ride the wave, he thrived. He won 2 WCW United States Heavyweight Championships and 7 WCW World Tag Team Championships. But the NWO lifestyle came with a dark side. The faction's anti-establishment, hard-living image encouraged a culture of excess. Fame and money flowed, but so did drugs and reckless behavior. For Hall, the environment accelerated his dependence on substances, turning what may have been a coping mechanism into a chronic struggle. Now, to really understand Scott Hall, you have to go back almost a decade before he became a wrestling star. In January 1983, he was working as a bartender in Orlando, Florida, just trying to make a living. But one night, a disagreement with a patron escalated far beyond what anyone could have expected. In the heat of the moment, Hall wrestled a gun away from the man, and in the chaos that followed, he shot and killed him. The act would later be ruled self-defense, but the moment itself was life-altering. Legally, Hall was ultimately cleared. He was first charged with second-degree murder, but the charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence, and the death was officially ruled justifiable homicide. Even so, the man Hall shot was reportedly his boss at the club, described in reports as a coked-out psycho who had allegedly killed someone just a week earlier. In that sense, Hall's actions likely saved his own life. The law had sided with him, but the human cost ran far deeper than any court ruling could address. Taking a life, even in self-defense, leaves a wound that lingers long after the legal papers are signed. Psychologists call it a moral injury, a deep, enduring trauma that no amount of justification or absolution can erase. For Hall, this invisible scar followed him for decades, quietly shaping his choices, influencing his behavior, and casting a shadow over even his brightest professional achievements. Every high-flying match, every championship victory, and every moment of public success was accompanied by this hidden weight, a reminder that some wounds never truly heal. The shooting in Orlando in 1983 left a scar that would follow Scott Hall for the rest of his life. Right after the incident, he didn't get the help he needed. Hall later admitted he should have sought counseling immediately, but he didn't. That decision, or lack of one, was pivotal. Without proper care, the acute trauma festered and turned into something chronic. post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. PTSD can be brutal. It brings hypervigilance, emotional numbness, and constant intrusive memories, making everyday life feel like a battle. Without proper coping tools, Hall turned to the only relief he knew: self-medication. Alcohol and drugs offered a temporary escape from the anxiety and the haunting memories, even if they only made things worse in the long run. Over the years, Hall spoke openly about the shooting in interviews and documentaries, confirming that the trauma haunted him constantly. His substance abuse wasn't random. It was a direct, if unhealthy, response to a deep, untreated psychological wound. Hall's struggles with alcohol and drugs became public. Fans and media often focused on these battles more than his in-ring accomplishments. His ex-wife cited addiction as the main reason for their divorce, and his problems led to multiple emergency hospitalizations and extended rehab stints, many of which WWE covered. But rehab alone wasn't enough. Substance use disorder isn't just about willpower, especially when it's rooted in trauma. Hall repeatedly cheated death, as he said, but each attempt at sobriety was challenged by the unresolved pain from his past. By the 2010s, Scott Hall had reached a dangerous crossroads. His health was failing, and he wasn't hiding the darkness anymore. He was openly talking about suicidal thoughts and feeling like he had nowhere to turn. That's when Diamond Dallas Page, or DDP, stepped in. Alongside Jake the Snake Roberts, who himself had battled addiction and come out the other side, they urged Hall to leave his old life behind and move to Atlanta to live with them. This wasn't just a standard rehab program. It was a full-scale, structured environment built to give Hall the best chance at survival and real recovery. The home they created, famously known as the Accountability Crib, was much more than just a place to stay. It was a carefully designed ecosystem for healing. Every day had structure. Hall had peer support from people who truly understood the pressures of professional wrestling, the fame, the physical pain, and the temptation to self-destruct. On top of that, DDP Yoga was introduced, combining physical therapy, strength building, and mindfulness techniques to heal both body and mind. Jake Roberts served as a mentor, reminding Hall that he wasn't alone and that recovery was possible even in the most challenging circumstances. Looking back, Hall said, "I knew something had to change. I've never been in denial about my demons." For the first time in years, he felt a sense of self-worth returning, and the physical pain that had often driven his substance use began to ease. This period of structured care and support paved the way for one of wrestling's most emotional comebacks. In 2014, Hall was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame for his iconic Razor Ramon character. His speech was short but full of heart. "Hard work pays off. Dreams come true. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do." For Hall, it wasn't just about celebrating his career. It was a public acknowledgement of the battles he had fought, the demons he had confronted, and the sobriety he had worked so hard to maintain. During this time, he also reconnected with his son, Cody Hall, who had been largely estranged during the worst phases of his addiction. Hall reflected, "I'm so thankful for Dallas for reintroducing me to myself. But as anyone familiar with addiction knows, recovery is rarely a straight path." Hall faced cycles of relapse, especially after leaving the controlled environment of the Accountability Crib. Friends like Kevin Nash and other wrestling colleagues often had to step in to pull him back from the brink. Even after the Hall of Fame induction in 2014, and again when the NWO was honored in 2021, the shadow of decades of trauma and hard living remained. These milestones were bright moments in his life, but Hall was always balancing on a thin line between stability and relapse. Recovery for him was a lifelong journey, a constant fight even in moments of triumph. By the final years of his life, Scott Hall's body was carrying the weight of decades of professional wrestling and years of heavy substance use. Every match, every stunt, every high-impact move had taken its toll. Broken bones, torn muscles, and joints worn down from constant punishment made daily life increasingly painful. Hall's chronic pain wasn't just discomfort, it was a constant, gnawing presence that limited mobility and made simple tasks a struggle. On top of that, years of alcohol and drug use had further weakened his body, affecting his organs, circulation, and overall resilience. Hip replacement surgery became inevitable. This wasn't an elective or cosmetic procedure, it was critical. His hip joints had deteriorated so badly that even walking short distances was agonizing. The surgery promised relief, a chance at improved mobility, and the possibility of reclaiming some independence. But after decades of pushing his body to its limits and the physical toll of substance abuse, Hall's system was fragile. His body simply wasn't equipped to handle the stress of such a major operation. On March 14, 2022, Hall's struggle came to its heartbreaking conclusion. In Marietta, Georgia, at the age of 63, he passed away following post-operative complications. After the surgery, blood clots formed, a known risk in hip replacements. But in Hall's weakened condition, they triggered multiple heart attacks, setting off a chain reaction his body could not survive. Hall's death was deeply tragic, but it can't be reduced to a simple story of addiction or personal failure. It was the culmination of a lifetime of physical, emotional, and psychological strain. Decades of untreated trauma, relentless stress, and the punishing demands of professional wrestling had created a body and mind vulnerable to collapse. The final chapter of his life was a medical tragedy, the ultimate cost of a life spent facing extraordinary external pressures while simultaneously carrying immense internal demons, demons that had haunted him since that fateful night in Orlando nearly 40 years earlier. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.